Now that we've had generative AI technologies available for almost 2 years, where are most businesses in terms of their implementations? It turns out that many hurdles still exist, so we're going to unpack how companies can overcome many of these barriers on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Adnan Masood. He is the Chief Architect for AI and Machine Learning at UST. Welcome to the show, Adnan.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. So, UST, you guys recently released results of a survey around AI implementation across the enterprise, digital AI spending and ROI, AI skills and workforce diversity. And there were questions about regulations, ESG benefits, and AI governance and ethics. So what do you think the big takeaways were from that survey? Is the current state of AI adoption in large companies what you expected, or are they ahead or behind from where you think they should be at this point? Because again, like I said in the intro, 2 years almost of generative AI technologies for companies.
Yeah, some of these actually from the survey came just as aligned as what we were thinking about. So for example, AI alignment with strategy, like 92% of the companies says that AI aligns with their strategic goals. 93% believe that AI will be essential in 5 years. So there's no quite surprises there because of, like you said, generative AI and AI being at the forefront of this thought leadership at this point.
Yeah.
One of the things we saw is a skills shortage. And we have seen that in the industry. We are constantly witnessing people are looking for talent in AI, machine learning, data science area. And in the report, 76% people reported that there's a severe shortage of in-house AI talent, right? And the barriers, when we looked at the barriers, that was also something which aligned with our expectations and what we are seeing in the industry. Security concerns, in-house expertise shortage, regulatory challenges, since there is no clear pathway to regulation right now.
Yeah.
And most of the companies wanted AI spending to increase. And those were very aligned with what we saw.
Did anything surprise you, or were there any surprises just in terms of the numbers? Like you expected all of them, but maybe you didn't expect so many or so few in any of the answers.
One of the things which was ROI expectations was a little bit surprising. Like 23% of the companies expected that AI ROI will take 4 or more years. And we are seeing actually more optimism in the industry to say it will take a little lesser bit of time. It's a mixed feeling, and I see you smiling. So
well, I'm smiling because there's usually not a lot of optimism sometimes around technology. So yeah, I guess that would be surprising too.
Yes.
I want to jump to the part where we talk about the hurdles, because if you guys asked about what were the top barriers for adoption, and again, none of these are really super surprising. The top answer was security concerns, and this both includes hallucinations and data privacy issues. Correct?
That's right.
Yep.
So. Yeah, compliance, security, privacy.
Okay.
Data. So what kind of data is being used to train the models?
Yeah.
And if we can rely on the models which are being trained, and especially for high-risk application, what kind of bias and toxicity is in there? I mean, data privacy, of course, is one of the key paramount concerns, because no AI system can really function effectively without making sure that the sensitive information is properly guarded.
So then the other two top hurdles coming in at 33% each was the shortage of in-house expertise, which you mentioned earlier, and then the compliance of the regulatory challenges. So for each of these hurdles, I want to ask you some other questions. The main question is how can a company, if they're experiencing these barriers, how can they overcome it? So on the security and the hallucination side of things, where a lot of these models are producing either hallucinations or they're throwing in data that they shouldn't be accessing, can a company fix this themselves, or do they have to rely on these big AI companies like OpenAI or Anthropic? Do they have to rely on them to fix those issues before a company will feel safer about the security? Like whose responsibility is it to fix these security concerns?
So I'll answer your first question first, which is
Okay.
about the talent gap. You wanted to know about how companies are dealing with a shortage of in-house expertise, which is preventing them from achieving their AI goals, and what is the best way to do it. So there's not just one way. Like upskilling programs are great within the having partnerships with universities and educational institutions. You have seen several, like deep learning AI is a great tool for that. There's specialized courses which are being built by different e-learning platforms associated with the schools, which help you upskill. And upskilling for Gen AI is not like training just data scientists or training just machine learning engineers. It's a very wide variety of things. So you have to also upskill your HR people and your marketing people and people across the spectrum of the enterprise. So because Gen AI is touching so many different facets within your organization that you have to have meaningful progress and upgrades for your people. So just hiring or bringing in consultants to do Gen AI magic for you
Right.
is not really the solution. It needs to be that. So that's what we are seeing, and all the successful organizations I have seen so far are bringing their own teams up to speed with Gen AI by doing meaningful projects internally, bringing in staff to teach them and get up to speed. So that was the first thing. The second thing you have asked about was about AI hallucination and whose responsibility it is to
Right.
address that, right? So the buck for AI toxicity or any kind of AI data privacy, AI related risk stops with the board or the executive branch, right? Because it's such an important thing that it can lies the fiduciary responsibility to not have AI do random things. You have to make sure that your AI has attribution, has citation, doesn't do hallucination, doesn't do confabulation,
Right.
doesn't leak security information, right? So that's the buck stops with the management. And the top management has to be heavily involved in making sure that's there. Now, having said that, if you're using an OpenAI model or if you're using a model from Anthropic or any other third party, and the data leak happens, what do you do?
Right.
Or how do you ensure the data privacy is there, the data governance, the data lineage, and also the storage of the data, how long they're going to store it, and how you build those guardrails. So
Is that one of the reasons you think? Is that one of the reasons you think many companies aren't possibly adopting it because they don't want these big companies to potentially have access to that data? I've heard that before with some of the other guests on the show. They said that there was some doubt, and that's why that's why companies were either trying to build it themselves or work with smaller models, perhaps.
That is one of the concerns.
Yeah.
People don't want their data, their code base, any of the private things they are working on, their financial statements or other things going out in the cloud and then being leaked potentially.
Yeah.
Even though there are enterprise guarantees, I mean, the enterprise guarantees exist around these clouds, especially like Azure OpenAI provides all the enterprise guarantees you will get from Azure. So whether it's reliability, security, SLAs, enterprise grade security around how long the data is kept, all of that. And they don't use the prompts which are being sent out for training. It's for auditability. They keep a 30-day governance period where they monitor the prompt for toxicity or anything foul has been said, right? But still that concern is there. It's actually really interesting because, Keith, you see that the majority of these companies, their data actually reside in the cloud. And they're still skeptical of sending these prompts or these models over there.
Right.
Having said that, it's not without, just people are just not, skeptical for no reason. I think there is some truth to that. So you probably remember in the beginning of this, there was several leaks happened when the code base for a large company was actually exposed. The prompts were exposed. People could see each other's chats.
Yep.
So there has been some incidents like this happen, and you don't want the questions you have asked to be leaked. So that is the rise of the SLMs, the small language models, or private models, including, Llama 3.2 just came out. So the private models people can now deploy locally, and they are kind of master of their own domains. They don't have to worry about how many tokens are getting used, even though provisioning those hardware and having it running, it requires some effort, but they can necessarily do that. So going back to the point of around hallucination and confabulation and toxicity, guardrails and making sure that, especially for use cases which are very high risk, so loan provisioning or giving people jobs, so employment, sorting your resumes or figuring out the right candidate, those cannot have inherent bias or cognitive bias,
Right.
which can in fact protected attributes, right? So that's where security has to be baked into the AI governance at every stage.
Yeah.
So that is why.
Yeah. I was going to say, is that something the company can then build on their own? Can they build their own guardrails, or do they still have to rely on these other companies to do it for them?
Well, the companies, what they're doing right now, like OpenAI, for example, the ChatGPT, they have really good guardrails around the models to protect against a lot of things. So if you cannot get it to start becoming, more homophobic or start saying racial slurs or any of those things, right? Those models are fairly well guarded on that space, but they're probably not well guarded for your use cases. I think that's where the distinction comes to play.
Right.
That how we know that these models are trained on internet data. And Keith, we both know that how toxic internet data could be and how biased it could be. So there has been proven over and over in research. Dr. James Zhao, one of the researchers I work with at the Stanford AI Lab, he has published a paper. It's a bit dated, but he has published several preceding writings about it, that how large language models and transformer models are biased.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're using a use case and then you can't completely rely on the demographic parity and equalized odds, these are the terms used to figure out the bias for a model. You have to calculate it themselves for your use case.
Right.
So it's a loan. Yeah.
So it does sound like there would have to be a mix between the two, depending on on the use case. Because again, I don't think a company is going to ask OpenAI to build a guardrail to prevent salary data coming out of the company. That should still be up to the company to make sure that doesn't happen. On the shortage question of the talent, you had mentioned that there's going to be a lot of upskilling and training that companies are going to have to do. Can you give an estimate on how long it'll take for a lot of companies to do this? Because it does seem like hiring outside expertise is the short-term answer, that the long-term answer would be to upskill your existing workforce. And it feels like that could take a number of years. Like, aren't you also, like, UST is also doing a thing where it's upskilling all of its employees? I think that was a program you guys had, right?
We have 25,000 of our employees are getting trained in generative AI in various different areas, whether it's marketing, sales, or account management, HR, all the different departments, including data science, machine learning, software development, all the different spectrums across the organization are getting trained on. We have a program around this.
And you're not rolling that out in about a week or so, right? Like, it takes a while to roll that out to how many? 35,000?
That's 35,000. It's an interesting point because we are not trying to make everybody a data scientist. And I think within any organization, they are not trying to make everybody a data scientist. The key here is that are they good enough to be able to use Copilots? Are they competent enough to get to that point? And to this, there's a really interesting point with Dr. Sadal Neely. She's a Harvard professor. She's my professor at Harvard University. And she wrote this book called Digital Transformation, and she presented this 30% rule. 30% rule is that it comes from linguistics, that in order to be conversant in the language, native speakers have a vocabulary of about 12,000 words. Mm-hmm. But the people who English is a second language, any other language is a second language, their vocabulary is about 3,500 to 3,000 to 3,500 words. So business proficiency they can gain. So her thesis is, and it's actually like she did research on that and there's papers around it, that if you have 30% of the knowledge of a specific domain, you are conversant in it. You are able to communicate ideas fluently. You can understand it to a certain point. You're not an expert again, like you are not a native speaker, but you can communicate those ideas. And that she applied to technology. And I think that's a very powerful metaphor for having 30% of the LLMs and Gen AIs and understand that. And that 30% rule will enable you, in our case, an organization, to have people work on it, right? So they can easily be conversant. They don't have to be all prompt engineers or data scientists, but if they can do enough prompt engineering to generate awesome marketing messages, that's perfect, right?
Right.
You enable your organization to go to that point, so your marketing people are not upskilled upstaged by somebody who has just learned prompt engineering and now starting to do it or creating images. They all have a skill to actually do it.
So you want to have a workforce that's that knows enough to make them not super dangerous, but at least to not annoy the really smart people at the company. Like, so for the big problems, you still got the really smart people, but then you don't want the staff to keep asking you how to do something, because then that takes away from the really hard work, right? That's the image I get in my head, is you want to make sure your staff can do the basic stuff that they need to do, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
If you put it that way, yeah. In their specific domain, they have enough capabilities and skills to do their job well, and they will learn from it.
Yeah.
But they're not all Gen AI experts. They are experts within their domain, and they are using Gen AI as a tool, as a co-pilot, as an augmenter to their capabilities and skills.
Well, that's why I also tell people not to train me too much into technology, because then I become dangerous and I start poking holes in things, and then the IT people get really mad at me for some of the stuff I do. So, yeah. But AI, I'm happy to learn, and I do all of the experimenting with that kind of stuff. The third hurdle from your survey was talking about compliance and regulatory challenges. So there was some recent legislation on AI in Europe, and I think California also passed some legislation around that. I wanted to just get your thoughts on there. So do companies need to then rely on governments to come up with these regulations? And it feels like if they want more rules, that would slow down the adoption of AI rather than increase it. But it feels like you have a feeling that regulation and compliance would be good in this case, right?
Yeah, I'll make a couple of points here.
Yeah.
Number one is that we currently don't have a comprehensive regulation around that space to regulate AI. Companies have been doing self-regulations for the longest part. There is no regulation out there that says, okay, you have to limit your LLM to say certain things, and it has to have guardrails. Companies have been doing self, because they have to operate with businesses, and these are certain norms we have from other regulations ahead of the time. For example, privacy laws, for example, anti-discrimination laws we have around loans or around admissions and jobs and other things.
Right.
So that inherently pushes companies to self-regulate and ensures that they don't violate, even in the absence of having an AI Act in place. Now, you mentioned about EU AI Act and California privacy laws. They have a more stringent oversight. So if I sum it up, like, there are two camps in the industry. One is that who wants to have a stringent laws around AI development and research. So they want to make sure that the LLMs are not beyond certain size, because they think that if they are too big, they're going to become too dangerous. Mm-hmm. So 1 trillion parameter being the limit, an arbitrary limit, which makes no sense, but having that kind of restriction to saying what LLM is too big and what can people have access to. And the second group, which I belong to, is and a lot of other researchers, including the Meta's researcher, Yann LeCun, who is a big proponent of open source. His point of view is that we can't have a restriction on AI research. What we can have restriction on is application of AI.
Okay.
So how you're using that use case, and does that violate any laws, and does that have any issues? That's the one. So applied AI can have restrictions, and the research of the AI and the development, that's important. And that makes sense to me, because imagine if we say, no, you cannot make any model bigger than 1 trillion. We can implement that in the US. We can enforce that in the US, Silicon Valley. But the development of these tools actually can happen anywhere, right? It's not like it requires, you need a machine and then you need some GPUs and you can build these things. So what is stopping it from a competing nation doing that?
Right.
So that's why it's that these are the two schools. Now, EU AI Act has been, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to say is what you're seeing now in the regulation space geared more towards the AI research? Are you seeing any regulations that are trying to rein in the applied? The applied AI stuff that you were talking about?
The original drafts, which was proposed for EU AI Act, had that leniency towards more stringent measures for the LLM providers as compared to applied. But a lot of people talked about it, and they listened to the researchers, and they made it more applied one, so application based. And they also created this risk profiles. I'm sure you're aware of that high risk, the prohibited AI applications, facial recognition, etc., for law enforcement. Then there's second tier, which is high risk application, medium and low. So that risk stratification, creating these different segments and clusters of different types of use cases, actually creates a really good way of thinking about the problem in a very segmented manner. If it's a recommendation system for movies, I don't really need to worry about too much of how it does it unless there is some very nuanced case. But if it's something related to a medical field or financial services which has impact, it's a high risk application. That's what EU AI Act did, and I think that was a perfect example of how applied AI use cases can be regulated, and that's what they did. Now, the California bill, recent one, the SB 1759, I think that's the number. I could be off a little bit, but that's the one which was more lenient towards having and a lot of researchers, including Dr. Fei-Fei Li, Dr. Andrew Ng, everybody spoke against it for the concerns it can have in terms of privacy laws.
Yeah.
So those stringent, if there are more stringent laws which can restrict and prohibit you from doing open research, then that's something which I don't support, of course. And a lot of researchers in Silicon Valley, even in companies, don't support that because they have to make sure that they are able to compete in the open market.
So I guess what would a company do if they are concerned about a lot of these, or are they concerned more about the new regulations or the lack of regulations? Where from your survey, it felt like that they were concerned about the lack of regulations. They at least want a framework or some basic rules, right?
Yeah, they want to understand it's not Wild West. They want to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And how can they, what should they do to not get in trouble? If they want to use AI, like, can I just do decision making in AI? Yeah. Can I do my claims processing with AI and then don't get fined for that? So they want to understand what the boundaries are so they can play in there. And most companies, they become laggard because of that very reason.
Yeah, I think that's what I think you hit the nail on the head when you said like companies don't want to get in trouble. And then, because if they adopt a large program and deploy this AI, then all of a sudden it gets revealed that they're doing something wrong and the government gets involved and they're really mad. Like that's a really worst case scenario for them. So they'd rather know the rules up front, I guess, right?
That's right. Yeah. And they because there's no rule. So Biden had a AI Act, the AI Act out passed recently. It's executive order. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, it's not act. It's an executive order.
You're never going to get a law here, Adnan. We're going to rely on California and Europe, basically. I don't think you're going to see a national AI policy at any point, unless something really bad happens.
So executive order has a good guidelines, and they are applying it on federal employees. And NIST had a framework as well. So, but California takes the lead in a lot of these kind of privacy laws and making regulations, and then they become a part of nationwide. One of the things California did a while ago, which other people have followed, is that if you are giving financial advice, you have to disclose yourself as a bot. So a bot cannot come and say, hey, I am your financial advisor, put your 401k in here, right? It can't do that. It needs to actually identify that, hey, I'm a robot, and I'm not so those things have to be, and they implement it. And I think those are very common sense laws to be put in place that, if you have to identify yourself as AI versus a human.
All right. I wanted to shift gears on the next question. Yeah. We were talking about the ROI, where you were saying that most people expect ROI on their projects to be in the 2-year time frame, yet 25% of those surveyed said it could take 4 years or more. And I think you were saying that that's optimistic. Like the optimism is there for under 4 years or over 4 years. What was your take?
Under, right? So expecting to see everything. Yeah.
So we've had a lot of recent stories here talking about this whole trough of disillusionment that a lot of companies are facing, and there's been a lot of coverage about a lot of ROI that hasn't happened yet. So I can't see a lot of company accounting departments going, wait, they're going to go, wait, you want 4 years to do this project? Like, I just don't see that happening. Where did this 4 year figure come from? I mean, is that just because they're hopeful that, or they understand that a lot of these projects might take 4 years?
Yeah, so it's again a nuanced question to say, hey, our finance departments are looking at the balance sheet and then saying, hey, what did you? I did this much investment in buying all these licenses for this specific AI tool, and how would you? What am I getting in return? Right, the quick return in that case. So there are certain fields and areas where you can get quick returns. So, for example, customer support. If you are able to make calls faster, more efficient, then you are able to answer more calls and get a better customer satisfaction, both tangible and non-tangible results. So customer time to answer is reduces, it increases your efficiency, and of course the workload. And so it's overall a win-win. But not every use case is similar to that. So AI is more of a bold stroke in an organizational hierarchy. It's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
So that's important for people to realize. I know you have been around when the cloud revolution happened. Everybody was trying to migrate things to cloud, and there was also the question of ROI. And most of the businesses and the financial departments and CFOs understood that running things on the cloud is, from a cheap perspective, is possibly it's the feature parity is there. It's not the cost effectiveness which drives you to the cloud. It's the other abilities which do. So, for instance, having the availability, high availability across multiple platforms and across multiple continents, reliability, the security which comes with it, with not managing your own infrastructure, the control you get by having those data centers across the globe, and then being able to deploy things in different waves to different demographics instead of managing all of that yourself, right? Reliability, security, accuracy, all the abilities, the non-functional requirements is what makes cloud deployment important. Similarly, in the case of AI, I think organizations are intelligent enough to realize that the ROI is, they were going to see some ROI within 2 years.
Yeah.
But a quarter of them anticipate that it will take 4 years or more. And for any comprehensive use case, I think the discrepancy between the short-term optimism and the long-term reality is something the organization needs to manage carefully, right?
Yeah. All right, so there's also some new models that are out there, and so I was wondering, right, do you think that maybe we're just at that inflection point where there's a pause between what companies have already done, and now maybe that they were waiting for these new models to maybe try some of the more ambitious projects? So, we seem to be doing okay with the easy projects right now, but are we going to get to the longer and bigger ones now that we have maybe some new models that can do reasoning and things like that?
Right. So you're spot on here. Right? The easy wins we had, like chatbots, basic automation, predictive analytics, like those have been tackled. But the real transformation will come when the companies are going to do more ambitious projects. So that will have things like you mentioned. OpenAI has recently come up with their O1 model, which is essentially giving reasoning, better reasoning. I don't know if you have played around with it. It thinks and it gives you better code, better results. And those kind of models help you build trust, talent, governance framework. I mean, everything across this, because now you can have multimodal reasoning based on that data. There's another model released by Allen NLP company, E2AI. So they have built Molmo, and Molmo is our first open source multimodal model openly available, which is really powerful, right? So you can take a picture and you don't have to send it to OpenAI or anybody else. You can actually have an edge device do this, right? So those things really help companies move beyond these isolated pilots and towards more enterprise-wide AI implementations and strategies,
right?
Especially in healthcare, finance, etc.
So what it feels like is that we'll get rid of some of the current hurdles, but then we'll just create new ones as new models come out or new projects come out, or maybe they'll be the same hurdles. It'll just be a different project that they're dealing with, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. In terms of hurdles, I think those are all opportunities. And this is a long march, right? It's a gradual, sustained effort. And imagine how models used to behave an year ago, and now how much mature they are, and how the results are better and less lazy, and they have better accuracy, precision, recall, less hallucinations. And these models, behind the scenes, OpenAI, Anthropic are implementing deep, complex changes, which are helping make these models better and more reliable as we are moving forward. But another spectrum for that is open source, right? Open source is actually raising the bar. So what we are seeing here is open source raises the bar, and then in order to compete with that, each one of these companies. So it's becoming a race to the top at this point, where people are innovating, constantly trying to out-innovate each other.
Right. All right. Adnan Masood, again, thanks for joining us on the show today and talking about a lot of these trends in the enterprise. So thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.